Businessman steals siblings' inheritance, but the hidden safe held a truth that destroyed his life. When Thomas Montgomery died, his eldest son Michael thought he had orchestrated the perfect plan to steal his siblings' inheritance. But what he didn't know was that his father had seen it coming, and the old golden key Sarah inherited would unlock more than just a hidden safe. It would reveal a truth so powerful that it would shake the foundations of everything Michael had schemed to build. This is a story about justice, faith, and the real meaning of success, where greed meets its match in the most unexpected way. In Bedford Falls, Connecticut, the Montgomery Pharmacy chain stood as a testament to the American dream. What began as a single storefront in 1983 had grown into 50 thriving locations, each one built on Thomas Montgomery's unwavering commitment to integrity and community service. Thomas sat in his office at the company headquarters, studying an old photograph on his desk. It showed him and his late wife Mary on the day they opened their first pharmacy. They were young, hopeful, and driven by a shared vision to build a business that put people before profits. Mary's words still echoed in his mind. A business without heart is just a building with a cash register. The sound of raised voices from the boardroom interrupted his memories. Through the glass walls, he could see his eldest son, Michael, the company CEO, gesturing animatedly during the quarterly meeting. At 45, Michael had his father's height and commanding presence, but none of his humility. His Harvard MBA and aggressive business style had doubled company profits in 5 years, but at what cost? The employee health benefits are eating into our margins, Michael's voice carried through the door. We need to make cuts to stay competitive. Thomas pushed himself up from his desk, his heart heavy. At 72, he wasn't as spry as he used to be, but some battles were worth fighting. He entered the boardroom just as Michael was showing a PowerPoint presentation about streamlining operations. These people have families, Michael, Thomas interrupted, his voice firm. Some of them have been with us for 30 years. That's exactly the problem, Dad. Michael turned, his expensive suit a stark contrast to his father's simple button-down shirt. We're running a business, not a charity. The other board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. They'd seen these clashes between father and son before, but this one felt different. Your mother and I built this company on trust, Thomas countered. Our employees trust us to take care of them, just as they take care of our customers. Mom's been gone for 10 years, Michael's voice turned cold. Times have changed. As if on cue, Thomas's phone buzzed. It was a text from his daughter Sarah. Don't forget your heart medication, Dad. I'll stop by after my hospital shift. Sarah, his middle child, had her mother's gentle spirit. At 42, she balanced her nursing career with caring for her aging father, never complaining about the late-night calls or emergency visits. His youngest, Daniel, 40, had followed Mary's passion for education, becoming an ethics professor who often used Montgomery pharmacies as an example of conscious capitalism in his lectures. The board meeting ended in a stalemate, but Thomas couldn't shake his unease. That evening, he visited St. Michael's Church, something he'd done every Wednesday for 40 years. Something troubling you, Thomas? Father Patrick asked, finding him deep in prayer. Just making sure everything's in order, Father, Thomas smiled wearily. Mary always said we should be ready when God calls. Later that night, in his study, Thomas pulled out an old leather journal. His fingers traced Mary's handwriting on the first page. Remember, success isn't measured in dollars, but in lives touched. He began writing, his pen moving purposefully across the paper. There was so much to say, so much to prepare. The chest pain started subtly, a slight pressure that he tried to ignore. By the time he reached for his phone, the pain had become unbearable. His last conscious thought was of Mary's smile in that old photograph, and a prayer that their children would remember what truly mattered in life. The next morning, the headlines would read, Thomas Montgomery, founder of Montgomery Pharmacies, dies at 72. But the real story of legacy, betrayal, and divine justice was just beginning. The funeral drew hundreds of mourners to St. Michael's Church. Employees from all 50 Montgomery Pharmacy locations came to pay their respects, many sharing stories about Thomas's kindness over the years. He helped me pay for my daughter's college, whispered Margaret Stevens, who'd worked as a pharmacy technician for 20 years, said it was an investment in the future. While mourners filled the church, Michael Montgomery worked the phones in his office. "Listen, James," he spoke quietly to his lawyer, "everything needs to be ready before the will reading tomorrow. No mistakes." James Wilson had been the Montgomery family's attorney for 15 years, but the stack of cash Michael had delivered to his office made him forget his loyalty. "The documents are prepared. I've got Carl at the courthouse ready to process them." Robert Chen, the company's CFO, stood guard outside Michael's office, intercepting anyone who might interrupt. He and Michael had already agreed. With Thomas gone, it was time to run Montgomery Pharmacies like a real business. Sarah noticed her brother's absence from the reception, but was too grieved to question it. She stood greeting mourners, accepting condolences, her nurse's training, helping her maintain composure. Daniel stood nearby, his wife and 2 children providing silent support. "Your father was a great man," Father Patrick told them. "He came to see me the day he passed, seemed to know his time was near." The next morning, the family gathered at James Wilson's law office. Michael arrived last, taking his seat with an air of confidence that made Sarah uneasy. "Before we begin," Wilson shuffled his papers, "I want to express my condolences. Thomas was more than a client, he was a friend." The reading started normally, standard legal language about sound mind and final wishes. Then came the distributions. "To my son Michael, I leave controlling interest in Montgomery Pharmacies with full executive authority." Sarah and Daniel exchanged confused looks. Their father had always stressed equal partnership among his children. "To my daughter Sarah, I leave my personal effects, including the contents of my study. To my son Daniel, I leave my library and personal papers." "That's impossible," Daniel interrupted. "Dad always said the company would be shared equally." Michael stood, straightening his tie. Dad changed his mind. He saw who was really qualified to run things. "When?" Sarah demanded. "When did he change the will?" 2 months ago, Wilson answered smoothly. "Everything's properly documented and witnessed." Sarah's hands trembled as she accepted a small box of her father's belongings. Inside, she found an old golden key, seemingly worthless among the few personal items she'd inherited. "I suggest you both clean out your offices by the end of the week," Michael announced. "We're restructuring the management team." Outside the law office, Robert Chen was already implementing changes. Security codes were being reset. Email accounts suspended. Employee meetings scheduled to announce the new direction. "He can't do this." Daniel paced the parking lot. "Dad would never cut us out." "Something's wrong." Sarah clutched the key. "This isn't what Dad wanted." But Michael had planned well. By day's end, rumors circulated about Thomas's last-minute concerns over his younger children's business acumen. Loyal employees found themselves suddenly unsure whom to trust. In his new corner office, Michael raised a glass with Robert Chen to the future of Montgomery Pharmacies. "What about the old-timers?" Chen asked. "They were loyal to your father." "Anyone who can't adapt can find work elsewhere," Michael replied. "This is business, not a family reunion." Meanwhile, Sarah sat in her father's study, examining the key. It looked old, possibly important, but like everything else that day, its significance remained just out of reach. Sarah sat cross-legged on the floor of her father's study, surrounded by boxes of old papers. The golden key lay on a stack of photos beside her. After a week of sleepless nights, something about it kept nagging at her mind. "Look at this," she called to Daniel, who was sorting through their father's books. She held up a yellowed newspaper clipping from 1983. It showed their parents standing proudly in front of the first Montgomery Pharmacy. Daniel walked over and squinted at the image. "Wait, what's that behind them?" In the background, partially visible behind their parents, stood an old safe mounted in the wall. Sarah's heart jumped. The key in her hand suddenly felt heavier. As she dug deeper through the box, she found their mother's old diary. Inside, a note fell out. "Thomas insisted on the wall safe, said some things are too important for bank vaults. Only family will know where to look." "The museum?" Sarah and Daniel said simultaneously. The original Montgomery Pharmacy had been converted into a company museum 5 years ago. Michael had called it a waste of money, but their father insisted on preserving where it all began. An hour later, they pulled up to the old building. Joe Martinez, the maintenance man who'd worked there for 30 years, greeted them at the door. "Miss Sarah, Mr. Daniel," he smiled sadly. "First time back since." Sarah nodded, unable to speak for a moment. "Your father used to come here every Sunday after church," Joe said, unlocking the door. "Said it helped him remember what mattered." Inside, the museum was a timeline of their family's history. Old prescriptions, photographs, newspaper articles, each telling part of their parents' story. "I remember playing here as kids," Daniel touched an old counter. "Mom would let us help count inventory. Using M&Ms instead of pills." Sarah smiled at the memory. They made their way to the back office, now set up as a replica of their father's original workspace. A large portrait of Thomas and Mary Montgomery hung on the wall. Sarah approached the portrait, studying it carefully. "Help us, Dad," she whispered. "Show us what you were protecting." Her fingers traced the frame's edge, feeling for anything unusual. There, a slight gap behind the portrait's right side. "Daniel, help me with this." Together, they carefully lifted the portrait. Behind it, just as in the old photograph, was a wall safe. Sarah's hands shook as she inserted the key. Well, what are you two doing here?" They spun around. Robert Chen stood in the doorway, his expression hard. "This is private property now," he said. Michael was clear about unauthorized visitors. "This was our father's legacy." Daniel stepped forward. "You have no right." "I have every right," Chen cut him off. "As CFO, I'm responsible for all company assets, including this museum." Sarah kept her body between Chen and the safe, praying he hadn't noticed it. "We're just collecting personal items," she said calmly. "We'll be gone soon." Chen checked his phone. "You have 5 minutes. After that, I'll have security escort you out." He left, but his message was clear. They weren't welcome anymore. "Quick." Sarah turned back to the safe. The key turned smoothly, the door opening without a sound. Inside lay a thick envelope and several files. They barely had time to stuff everything into Sarah's bag before hearing footsteps approaching. As they hurried out past the security guard, Sarah glimpsed Margaret, her father's old secretary, watching from across the street. The older woman gave a slight nod, as if she'd been expecting them. Back in Sarah's car, they sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the safe's contents between them. "Whatever's in here," Sarah finally said, "Dad wanted us to find it." "And Michael wanted to make sure we didn't," Daniel added grimly. The envelope felt heavy in Sarah's bag, carrying what they hoped were answers, but also the knowledge that their fight was just beginning. Sarah spread the documents from the safe across her dining room table. Daniel sat beside her, both still in shock from what they were discovering. "Look at these dates." Sarah pointed to a stack of financial reports. "Michael started moving money offshore 3 years ago." Daniel picked up another document. "The pension fund. He's been draining it. Hundreds of employees could lose their retirement savings." The evidence was overwhelming. Page after page showed systematic fraud, falsified board minutes, forged signatures, backdated contracts. Michael had been preparing for this takeover long before their father's death. "Here's the original will," Sarah's voice cracked. "Dated just 2 weeks before Dad died. Everything was supposed to be split equally." A knock at the door made them both jump. Sarah gathered the papers quickly, but it was only Margaret, their father's former secretary. "I saw you at the museum." Margaret stepped inside. "I've been waiting for you to find the safe." "You knew about it?" Daniel asked. Margaret nodded. "Your father told me to watch for you. There's more you need to know." She pulled out a USB drive. "I've been keeping copies of emails. Michael's been cutting employee health benefits but hiding it with fake policy documents. Some of our longest-serving employees won't have coverage for their medications soon." Sarah thought of Bill Jenkins, who'd worked the night shift for 20 years and needed daily heart medication. Susan Torres, the elderly cashier with diabetes. Faces and names of people who'd been like family. "We have proof of everything," Daniel said. "We can fight this." "It's not that simple," Margaret warned. "Michael has the board under his control. Robert Chen's been threatening anyone who asks questions." As if to prove her point, Sarah's phone buzzed with a text. Her office at the hospital had been broken into. Nothing taken, but her desk was ransacked. "They're looking for these documents," Sarah realized. "You're not the only ones watching Michael," Margaret said. "Tom Harris, the retired accountant, has been tracking unusual payments, And Father Patrick, your father told him things during confession. Daniel started organizing the papers into groups. We need to be careful. One wrong move and Michael could destroy the evidence and us. He's already moving against us, Sarah said. 3 nurses who supported me were fired yesterday. The board claimed restructuring, but the message was clear. Margaret's phone chimed. Chen's calling an emergency board meeting tomorrow. They're voting on a complete overhaul of employee benefits. How many families would that affect? Sarah asked. Over 500, Margaret's voice was grim. Many of them elderly or with chronic conditions. Daniel found another document, his face paling. The company's insurance policy was changed last month. If anything happens to Michael, his personal shares transfer to Chen. They've thought of everything. Maybe not everything. Sarah picked up their mother's old diary from the safe. A small note fell out. The warehouse on 5th Street, where it really began. What warehouse? Daniel looked confused. The distribution center. Margaret's eyes widened. Your parents' first business wasn't the pharmacy. They started as distributors, but hardly anyone knows that now. Sarah stood suddenly. Dad used to say, the real power isn't in the storefront, it's in the supply chain. They were interrupted by the sound of breaking glass. Someone had thrown a rock through Sarah's front window. Attached was a note. Back off, or worse, will come. We need somewhere safe to keep these documents, Sarah said, her nurse's training keeping her voice steady. I know a place, Margaret replied. Your father prepared for this too. As they quickly gathered the papers, Sarah noticed one final document in the safe. The letterhead read, Montgomery Distribution Services, but before she could read more, they heard cars pulling up outside. We need to go, Daniel urged. Now. They slipped out the back door, just as Robert Chen and 2 security guards entered through the front. Sarah clutched the documents to her chest, knowing they held not just evidence of crimes, but the key to their father's true legacy. The truth was finally coming to light, but at what cost? Sarah, Daniel, and Margaret huddled in Father Patrick's church office, examining the final document from the safe. It was a letter from their father, written the night he died. My dear children, Sarah read aloud, her voice trembling. If you're reading this, then God has called me home, and you've discovered what Michael has become. Daniel sat down heavily. Dad knew everything. For years I watched Michael's ambition turn to greed, the letter continued. I prayed for him, hoped he would remember the values your mother and I taught him. But one night, as I prayed in this very church, your mother came to me in a dream. She showed me what I needed to do. Margaret opened her laptop, pulling up files she'd secretly backed up. Your father spent the last 5 years preparing. The real Montgomery business was never the pharmacies, the letter revealed. Your mother and I started as distributors. While everyone focused on our retail locations, we quietly built the largest pharmaceutical distribution network in the region. Sarah looked up. Montgomery Distribution Services. The company supplies not just our pharmacies, but every major healthcare facility in 3 states, Margaret explained. It operates under a different corporate name now. Michael never paid attention to the supply side. He was too focused on cutting employee benefits to notice. The distribution company is worth 10 times what the pharmacies are, Father Patrick added, entering the room. Your father told me everything during confession. He needed someone to witness his plan. Sarah returned to the letter. I've transferred ownership of Montgomery Distribution Services to a foundation. Sarah, Daniel, you're both listed as directors. The foundation's mission is to ensure healthcare accessibility for all employees and their families. There's more. Margaret turned her laptop around. A video began playing, security footage from Michael's office. In it, he openly discussed the fraud with Robert Chen, detailing plans to strip employee benefits and sell off company assets. Dad had the office bugged? Daniel asked. Father Patrick shook his head. Not your father. Mary insisted on security cameras when they first opened. They were never removed, just forgotten. Except by Thomas. Michael's greed blinded him, Margaret said. He never questioned why the pharmacies had to buy inventory from that specific distributor, or why the contract couldn't be changed. Sarah found another page. The Foundation's bylaws, they require all Montgomery businesses to maintain premium healthcare coverage for employees. If they don't, The distribution company can terminate their supply contract, Daniel finished. Without it, the pharmacies can't operate. Your father believed in divine justice, Father Patrick said. He created a system where doing good was also good business. The letter's final paragraphs brought tears to their eyes. I couldn't stop Michael's corruption of my retail legacy, but I could ensure it wouldn't destroy the true heart of our business. The commitment your mother and I made to care for our corporate family. P.S. Check the third drawer of the filing cabinet in the museum office. There's a recorder that's been running for months. Michael's own words will be his undoing. Just then, Sarah's phone buzzed with a news alert. Michael had just announced plans to switch pharmaceutical suppliers, claiming it would streamline operations. He still doesn't know. Margaret smiled. Every major supplier in the region is contractually blocked from selling to Montgomery pharmacies. Your father locked those contracts in years ago. When Michael tries to change suppliers, Daniel started, the truth about the distribution company will come out. Sarah finished, along with everything else. Father Patrick closed his Bible. Your father always said that God works in mysterious ways. Sarah held the letter tight. Their father hadn't just left them a business, he'd left them a way to save everything he and their mother had built. Their battle wasn't over, but for the first time since his death, they felt their parents' guidance showing them the way forward. Michael slammed his phone down on his desk, making Robert Chen jump. What do you mean they won't supply us? Every distributor in the region gave the same response, Chen replied. They're all bound by non-compete agreements with Montgomery Distribution Services. I've never heard of them. Michael spun his chair toward the window. Find out who owns it. I tried. Chen shifted uncomfortably. The ownership is buried under layers of corporate entities and foundations. But there's something else. They're our current supplier. Michael turned back sharply. What? They've been our primary distributor for decades. The contract is ironclad. If we try to switch suppliers, they can cut us off immediately. Then buy them out, Michael snapped. We can't afford it. Their revenue is 10 times ours. Before Michael could respond, his secretary buzzed in. Sir, the employees are gathering in the lobby. Through his office window, Michael saw dozens of workers congregating below. Someone had leaked the planned benefits cuts, and now printed copies of the real insurance policies were circulating. Control this, he ordered Chen. But Chen was staring at his laptop. Michael, we have a problem. Someone posted internal emails about the pension fund on the company message board. Shut it down. I can't. The system's locked us out. Michael's phone buzzed with a text from his lawyer, James Wilson. Need to meet urgently. Evidence of fraud surfacing. In the lobby, the crowd was growing. Susan Torres, the senior cashier, was speaking to a local reporter. We gave decades to this company. Mr. Montgomery, the real Mr. Montgomery, promised we'd always be taken care of. Tom Harris, the retired accountant, stood nearby with documents in hand. The pension fund numbers don't add up. Someone's been moving money offshore. Michael grabbed his coat. Call security. Clear the building. The security team joined the protest, Chen said. And Michael, there's a board member talking to them. Emergency alerts began flooding their phones. The stock price was dropping as news of the employee protests spread. Suppliers were calling, concerned about payment guarantees. James Wilson burst into the office, his face pale. They have the original will and evidence of the forgery. Who has it? Michael demanded. Your siblings, and they have recordings from your office. Michael froze. That's impossible. We swept for devices. These are old, built into the walls decades ago. Chen's phone chimed. He read the message and sat down heavily. The distribution company, it's run by a foundation. Sarah and Daniel are the directors. What foundation? Michael's voice rose. The Mary Montgomery Healthcare Foundation. Your father set it up years ago. The pieces suddenly clicked. The supplier contract, the old security systems, their father's insistence on keeping the original office. Michael rushed to his computer, trying to access the company's supply chain records. His access was denied. Then his email stopped working. One by one, his administrative permissions disappeared. Someone's shutting us out of the system. Chen watched in horror. Margaret, Michael realized. She always handled the IT passwords. The office door opened again. A police detective stepped in holding a warrant. Mr. Montgomery, we need to ask you some questions about certain financial transactions. Michael looked to Chen for help, but his CFO was already walking toward the detective, hands raised. I want to make a deal, Chen said. I have evidence of everything. Through the window, Michael saw Sarah and Daniel arriving at the building. Employees parted to let them through, many reaching out to touch them supportively. His empire wasn't just slipping away. It had never truly been his to begin with. The Montgomery Pharmaceuticals boardroom buzzed with tension. Board members sat around the massive conference table, while reporters waited in the lobby below. Sarah and Daniel entered, followed by Margaret carrying a laptop and files. Michael sat at the head of the table, Chen's empty chair beside him speaking volumes. 2 police officers stood discreetly by the door, warrants served, but allowing the board meeting to proceed. This meeting is closed to non-board members, Michael announced, pointing at Margaret. Actually, Sarah placed a document on the table. As directors of the Mary Montgomery Healthcare Foundation, Daniel and I have full voting rights, and Margaret is our corporate secretary. The board chairman cleared his throat. We're here to address serious allegations about company management and employee benefits. These allegations are baseless, Michael stood. This is a coordinated attack by disgruntled siblings who couldn't handle their reduced inheritance. Sarah nodded to Margaret, who connected her laptop to the room's display screen. Let's start with the original will, shall we? The document appeared on screen, showing Thomas Montgomery's true intentions for equal division of the company. Next came banking records, tracking millions moved to offshore accounts. These documents are fake, Michael interrupted. Like the will you forged? Daniel asked. The next slide showed James Wilson's signed confession, detailing how they had altered the documents. Michael's face reddened. You can't prove. His own voice filled the room. The security footage played clearly. Once Dad's gone, we'll gut the benefits package. These people cost too much to keep healthy. Board members shifted uncomfortably as recording after recording played. Michael plotting with Chen, arranging kickbacks, laughing about employee hardships. Turn that off, Michael shouted. Why? Sarah asked. These are your words, your decisions. You don't understand business. Michael's voice shook. Sentiment doesn't pay bills. Dad was weak, letting employees bleed us dry with their medical problems and pensions. The room fell silent. Sarah let his words hang in the air. Now about Montgomery Distribution Services, Daniel continued. Our actual parent company. Michael laughed harshly. There is no parent company. I run everything. Show them, Margaret. The screen displayed corporate documents revealing the true structure, the distribution company's size, its control over regional pharmaceutical supply, the foundation's ownership. Impossible, Michael whispered. Dad spent years planning this, Sarah said. He saw what you were becoming. This was his response. A father's last attempt to save his son from himself, Daniel added. Michael lunged for Margaret's laptop, but the police officers stepped forward. In his rage, he knocked over a water pitcher, documents scattering. You think you've won? He shouted. I still run the pharmacies. I'll close them all down first. You'll do nothing of the sort, a new voice declared. The board chairman stood. I move for immediate removal of Michael Montgomery as CEO, pending criminal investigation. Second, another board member quickly added. You can't do this. Michael turned to them. After everything I did for profits. Profits. Sarah picked up their mother's photo from the wet table. Mom and Dad built this company to help people. The profits were meant to support our employees, not destroy them. The vote was unanimous. As security arrived to escort Michael out, he turned back one last time. This company will fail without me. Your bleeding hearts will bankrupt everything. No, Michael, Daniel replied quietly. The company will return to what it always was, a place where business and compassion work together. Watching their brother being led away, Sarah and Daniel felt no joy. But as employee cheers echoed from the lobby, they knew their parents' legacy was finally secure. The true heart of Montgomery Pharmaceuticals would beat on. News of Michael's removal spread quickly through Bedford Falls. Local reporters camped outside Montgomery Pharmaceuticals headquarters as police carried out boxes of evidence. The headline in the evening news read, Montgomery heir removed as CEO amid fraud allegations. Inside the building, Robert Chen sat with federal investigators, detailing years of financial misconduct. It started small, he explained, moving money between accounts. Then it grew. Michael said we were modernizing the business, but we were just stealing from the employees. James Wilson, the family lawyer, broke down during his confession. I forged the will. Thomas Montgomery never meant to disinherit his children. I betrayed a man who trusted me for 15 years. Carl Peters from the courthouse returned his bribe money. I have a sick mother who depends on Montgomery's health coverage. What was I thinking? In the company cafeteria, employees gathered around television screens watching the story unfold. Susan Torres wiped tears as reporters interviewed her. We knew something was wrong when they started cutting our benefits. Mr. Montgomery, Thomas, would never have allowed it. Sarah and Daniel spent the day meeting with department heads, assuring them the company would remain stable. The board appointed them interim co-CEOs while a full audit was conducted. The pension fund will be restored, Sarah announced to relieved employees. The foundation has already transferred the funds Michael took. Tom Harris, the retired accountant, worked with auditors to trace every missing dollar. It's all here in the records, he said. Michael got careless. He thought nobody was watching. Father Patrick opened the church for a special prayer service. Thomas and Mary Montgomery built more than a business, he told the congregation. They built a family. Today, that family came together to protect itself. Local business leaders rallied around the company. Montgomery Pharmaceuticals was always different. The Chamber of Commerce president told reporters, they proved you could be profitable while taking care of your people. The employee parking lot filled with handmade signs, God bless the real Montgomerys, and faith in leadership restored. But not everyone celebrated. Michael's wife packed her bags and left for her parents' home in Connecticut. His country club membership was quietly revoked. Former friends suddenly became busy when he called. Detective Phillips led the criminal investigation. We found accounts in the Cayman Islands, Switzerland, Panama. He was preparing to take everything. The district attorney held a press conference. This isn't just corporate fraud. This was an attack on hardworking families who trusted their employer. We will prosecute to the fullest extent. Margaret organized teams to restore employee files. Michael had ordered destroyed. He tried to erase people's years of service to reduce their benefits, she explained, but we kept backups of everything. By evening, Sarah and Daniel sat exhausted in their father's old office. The portrait of their parents seemed to smile down at them. Dad knew this would happen, Daniel said. That's why he created the foundation. Sarah nodded. He gave Michael every chance to change. When he didn't. Divine justice, Father Patrick said from the doorway. Your father believed God would provide a way to protect his life's work. And he did. Outside, the evening shift arrived to a hero's welcome. Bill Jenkins, back from medical leave, resumed his supervisor position. The pharmacy counters hummed with activity as prescriptions were filled for grateful customers. The local paper's editorial summed it up best. Today, Bedford Falls witnessed what happens when greed meets justice. The Montgomery family's legacy of compassionate capitalism lives on, proving that doing good is good business. Sarah placed the golden key that started everything in a frame beside their parents' photo. It would remind future generations that some treasures are worth more than money, like truth, justice, and faith in doing what's right. The transition wasn't easy. 1 month after Michael's removal, Sarah and Daniel faced their biggest challenge yet, the annual executive retreat. We can't just continue business as usual, Sarah addressed the room of department heads. But change makes people nervous. Several executives shifted in their seats. These were Michael's people, hired for their focus on cost-cutting and efficiency. The employee profit-sharing program starts next quarter, Daniel announced. We're also expanding health coverage to include all family members. That'll kill our margins, objected Steve Peterson, the operations director. We should wait until the publicity dies down. This isn't about publicity, Sarah countered. It's about doing what's right. The meeting ended with 3 executive resignations. Good riddance, Margaret whispered as they left. They never understood our company culture. But problems mounted. Suppliers, nervous about the leadership change, demanded earlier payments. Competitors spread rumors about the company's stability. Some newer employees, hired under Michael's reign, resisted the cultural shift. The distribution centers having issues, Daniel reported during their daily meeting. Michael's team trained everyone to prioritize speed over accuracy. We've had 3 shipping errors this week. Sarah rubbed her temples. She'd been pulling double shifts at the hospital to maintain her nursing hours while managing the company. What about the new computer system? It's a mess, Margaret said. Michael's IT team encrypted everything. We're rebuilding from backups. The financial team brought more concerns. Our profit margins will drop initially with the new benefits package, the accountant explained. Some investors are getting nervous. But Sarah and Daniel stood firm. During a company-wide meeting, they unveiled their parents' original business plan from 1983. Mom and Dad knew that taking care of employees meant better service for customers, Sarah explained. They built this company on trust. Slowly, things began to improve. The first wave of expanded benefits rolled out successfully. Employee morale rose. Customer satisfaction scores, which had dropped under Michael's leadership, began to climb. They promoted Susan Torres to head of customer relations. Who better to train new employees than someone who's lived our values for 30 years? Daniel said. Bill Jenkins took charge of warehouse operations, implementing new quality control measures. Accuracy rates improved immediately. Tom Harris came out of retirement to help restructure the finance department. We're doing accounting the right way now, he declared. Everything transparent. The biggest surprise came from the distributorship. Without Michael's artificial cost inflation, the pharmacy chain's expenses dropped. The savings more than covered the expanded benefits. Your father was brilliant. Margaret showed them the numbers. The distribution company was always the real profit center. Michael never understood that. Still, challenges remained. One evening, Sarah found Daniel staring at their father's photo. Sometimes I wonder if we're doing this right, he admitted. Running a business is different from teaching about ethics. That's why we're doing it together, Sarah replied. You know the principles, I know the people, just like Mom and Dad. They hired new executives who shared their vision. Martha Chen, no relation to Robert, brought years of experience in ethical business practices as the new CFO. James Foster, a former hospital administrator, joined as operations director. The employee newsletter, discontinued under Michael, resumed publication. Its first headline read, Montgomery Pharmaceuticals returns to its roots. By quarter's end, the numbers told the story. While profits were slightly lower, employee turnover dropped to 0. Healthcare costs decreased as preventive care increased. Customer loyalty programs saw record participation. We're not just running a business, Sarah told a reporter. We're rebuilding a family. In the lobby, they hung a new mission statement. Profit with purpose, service with heart. Below it, their mother's favorite Bible verse. Do not withhold good from those to whom it is due, when it is in your power to act. 6 months after Michael's removal, Sarah stood in front of the old Montgomery Pharmacy Museum. Workers were installing a new sign, Montgomery Community Health Center. Your father would be proud, Father Patrick said, standing beside her. This was always his dream. Inside, the transformation was complete. The old pharmacy counter remained as a historical display, but the space now housed examination rooms and medical offices. Senior citizens filled the waiting area, many greeting Sarah by name. My Medicare doesn't cover all my medications, explained Ruth Martinez, age 78. This place is a blessing. The center provided free medical care to seniors and low-income families. Sarah volunteered there 2 days a week between her hospital shifts and company duties. Daniel walked in, leading a group of high school students. These are our first scholarship recipients, he announced. Children of Montgomery employees. 10 teenagers, all headed to college in the fall, stood proudly with their parents. Among them was Susan Torres's granddaughter, accepted to pre-med at Yale. The foundation will cover their full tuition, Daniel explained to a local news crew. Just like our parents helped employees send their kids to college. The company's transformation attracted national attention. Business magazines highlighted their employee-first approach. Healthcare journals praised their innovative community programs. Profits are actually up, Martha Chen reported during the quarterly board meeting. Employee wellness programs reduced our insurance costs. Happy workers mean better customer service. The numbers backed her up. Customer satisfaction reached 98%. Employee retention hit record levels. The stock price, after an initial dip, climbed steadily. "We're getting calls from other companies," James Foster told them. "They want to know how we do it." Montgomery's success sparked changes across the industry. Competing pharmacies improved their benefits to keep workers from leaving. Other businesses in Bedford Falls followed their community service model. The distribution company expanded its reach. "We're now supplying hospitals in 5 states," Margaret announced. "They appreciate our ethical pricing model." Sarah and Daniel used the increased profits to launch more community programs: free flu shots for schools, diabetes screening drives, health education workshops. The old break room became a training center, where veteran employees mentored new hires. Bill Jenkins taught classes on customer service. Susan Torres shared her decades of experience. "This isn't just a job," Susan told her trainees. "We're taking care of our neighbors." One day, a corporate headhunter approached Sarah. "I can offer you triple your salary at a larger chain," he said. Sarah smiled, thinking of her father. Some things are worth more than money. The local paper ran a feature story, "Montgomery's Revival: How Two Siblings Turned Corporate Greed into Community Good." The article detailed their journey, praising their balance of business success and social responsibility. Even their competitors admitted the change. "They've raised the bar for all of us," the CEO of a rival pharmacy chain told the Business Journal. "You can't just focus on profits anymore." Tom Harris, still helping with the books, showed them the latest figures. "We're not just profitable," he said. "We're sustainable. This model will outlast all of us." In the center's break room, Sarah found an elderly couple looking at the historical display. The woman touched the old pharmacy counter gently. "I got my first prescription here in 1983, she said. "Thomas and Mary helped me when I couldn't afford my medicine. Now my great-granddaughter gets her asthma treatments here for free." Sarah watched them leave, leaning on each other. Outside, the setting sun lit up the new sign. "Where care comes first, S. 1983. Some said it was just good business. Others called it divine providence. But for Sarah and Daniel, it was simply finishing what their parents started, proving that success and service could walk hand in hand. 1 year after Michael's removal, Daniel stood before his ethics class at the university. The lecture hall was packed, not just with students, but with business leaders and corporate executives. "The Montgomery case study isn't just about business ethics," he explained. "It's about choosing between profit and purpose, and realizing you don't have to choose at all." His new business ethics program had become the most popular course on campus. Companies sent their managers to attend. Other universities requested the curriculum. "We learned that ethical business isn't just morally right." Daniel clicked to the next slide showing Montgomery's financial results. "It's profitable." After class, a CEO from Chicago approached him. "We're restructuring our company. Would you consult with our board?" Sarah faced her own challenges balancing responsibilities. She still worked hospital shifts, now coordinating with the community health center. "Why keep nursing?" a board member once asked. "You run a major corporation." "Because it keeps me connected to what matters," she replied, checking a patient's vitals. "This is why we're in healthcare." The company's transformation had ripple effects throughout Bedford Falls. Other businesses adopted their profit-sharing model. The Chamber of Commerce created an ethics award, naming it after Thomas Montgomery. Then came an unexpected visitor. Michael's lawyer contacted them. Their brother wanted to meet. They found Michael changed by his year under house arrest. Gone was the expensive suit and arrogant manner. He sat across from them at Father Patrick's office, humbled. "I didn't understand what Dad built," he admitted. "I thought success meant bigger profits, no matter the cost." "It's not too late to learn," Sarah said quietly. "I've been reading his old journals," Michael continued, "watching how you've run things. I was wrong about everything." Daniel thought of their father's teachings about forgiveness. Everyone deserves a second chance. They didn't offer Michael a company position. Trust would take time to rebuild. But they listened to his ideas about improving efficiency without sacrificing employee benefits. Maybe start by volunteering at the health center, Sarah suggested. Get to know the people you wanted to hurt. The Montgomery business model gained national recognition. Harvard Business School published a case study. CNBC ran a special report, The Montgomery Revolution, Conscious Capitalism in Action. Sarah expanded the nurse training program, partnering with local colleges. Daniel's ethics curriculum was adopted by business schools nationwide. Your parents were ahead of their time, Margaret told them during a staff meeting. They knew business had a higher purpose. The employee newsletter featured success stories monthly. A janitor's daughter becoming a pharmacist, a cashier's son graduating medical school, a security guard opening his own business with company support. This is real wealth, Daniel told his students. Not just money in the bank, but lives transformed. Even their competitors benefited. The industry's reputation improved as more companies followed Montgomery's lead. Healthcare became more accessible as pricing practices changed. Sarah found her father's old business plan in the museum archives. His handwritten note in the margin read, "Success isn't measured in dollars, but in dignity preserved and lives improved." He was building more than a business, she realized. He was creating a legacy of compassion. The company's quarterly report told the story in numbers. Employee satisfaction at 96%, customer loyalty at record highs, steady profits, and a growing list of community programs. But the real changes showed in smaller ways. The way employees greeted customers by name, how managers knew their workers' families, the pride in everyone's voice when they said, "I work at Montgomery's." Looking at their parents' portrait, Sarah and Daniel saw not just the past, but the future. They had preserved more than a business. They had protected a vision of commerce with conscience, profit with purpose. "Mom and Dad were right," Sarah said softly. "Good business and good hearts go hand in hand." Margaret called Sarah and Daniel to the museum late one Friday afternoon. "I found something while digitizing the old records," she said, holding a small USB drive. "It was hidden in your father's old desk." They gathered in Thomas's former office, now part of the community health center. Father Patrick joined them, along with Susan Torres and Bill Jenkins. "This was recorded the day before your father died," Margaret explained, connecting the drive to a laptop. Thomas Montgomery's face appeared on screen, sitting in that very office. He looked tired, but peaceful. "My dear children," he began, "if you're watching this, then everything has happened as I prayed it would. You've discovered the truth, faced difficult choices, and honored the legacy your mother and I tried to build." Sarah gripped Daniel's hand as their father continued. "Michael's path troubled me for years. I tried to guide him, to show him that business isn't just about profits. But somewhere along the way, he lost sight of what matters most." Thomas picked up Mary's photo from his desk. "Your mother taught us that true success isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in lives touched, dignity preserved, and communities strengthened." He explained how he'd watched Michael changing, becoming obsessed with profits and power. "I knew I had to protect not just our family business, but our family's purpose. The distribution company, the foundation, the old security cameras, these weren't just business decisions. They were my attempt to ensure that greed couldn't destroy what we built." Thomas leaned closer to the camera. "Sarah, your heart for helping others, just like your mother. Daniel, your commitment to teaching ethics, carrying forward our values. You both understood what this company really means. I'm not leaving you a business," he continued. "I'm entrusting you with a mission, to prove that compassion and capitalism can work together, that profit and purpose aren't enemies." The next day, Sarah and Daniel called a company-wide meeting. Employees filled the health center's main hall. Michael sat quietly in the back, now volunteering 3 days a week at the center. They played their father's message for everyone. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. "1 year ago," Sarah addressed the crowd, "we faced a choice between profit and purpose. Today, we've proven they work best together." Daniel unveiled their latest initiative. The Thomas and Mary Montgomery Foundation would now offer full college scholarships to all employees' children who maintained good grades. "Education changed my life," Michael spoke up unexpectedly. "Dad tried to teach me what really matters. I finally understand." The company newsletter's headline that week read, "Montgomery's Legacy, 40 Years of Purpose-Driven Success. It featured photos from 1983 to the present, showing how the business had grown while keeping its heart. The health center continued to expand. Sarah's nurse training program became a model for corporate healthcare initiatives nationwide. Daniel's ethics curriculum was teaching a new generation of business leaders. That evening, Sarah found an old Bible in her father's desk. Inside, Mary had written, "To succeed in business, follow Matthew 7, verse 12. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you." The next board meeting approved plans for 10 new community health centers across the state. The Montgomery model of conscious capitalism was spreading, changing how businesses viewed success. "Your parents built something remarkable," Father Patrick told them. "Not just a successful business, but a testament to faith in action." The golden key that started their journey now hung framed in the health center lobby beneath the Montgomery family photo. It reminded everyone that some treasures can't be measured in money, like faith, integrity, and the courage to do what's right. Thomas Montgomery's final message still played occasionally at company meetings, reminding everyone of their mission. But his real message lived in every prescription filled with care, every patient treated with dignity, every employee proud to say they worked at Montgomery's. The American dream hadn't just survived, it had evolved, showing that success comes not from what you take, but from what you give back. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and share your thoughts in the comments below. What would you do if you were Sarah and Daniel? Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories about justice, family values, and the real meaning of success. Remember, true wealth isn't measured by what's in your bank account, but by the lives you touch and the legacy you leave behind.